Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. One of the things you'll notice, I'm wearing a hat here that says JCL on it. I don't think I've worn this in a video before. It stands for Junior Classical League. That's the organization, national organization, and it exists at state levels for Latin students all around the United States. It's kind of the official organization of Latin clubs. And I'm going to be talking about some pretty interesting Latin stuff today. And for this one, I just wanted to bring out I got to tell you, there's a few things I love more than Latin, which is appropriate since I'm a Latin teacher. And I just wanted to bring out a good, comfortable pipe. This is a bent brandy that I made off of a blank last year. And so just wanted to bring this out in a really comfortable Lane RLP6 that I've really been enjoying. So let's get this guy lit, and let's get to talking. So I want to talk about one particular speech from ancient Rome and why it is so important in the modern day. And particularly I want to talk about the guy who delivered that speech, a man named Cicero. Now, some of you may know Cicero from world history and so forth. Cicero lived from 106 to 43 BC. So first century BC guy. He was elected to the highest position in the Republic of Rome. The middle period of Rome's history, it was a republic like the United States, where they elected their officials, and he was the consul, C-O-N-S-U-L, consul of Rome. And in 63 BC, something happened. There was a guy named Cataline. Now, his full Latin name is Lucius Sergius Catilina. Now, that's spelled C-A-T-I-L-I-N-A. Not like Catalina Island off the coast of California. Catalina. Often we change the A at the end of his name to an E when we say it in English, and we refer to him as Cataline. Cataline was a nobleman who, after numerous attempts to be elected consul, failed attempts, decided to say, forget it, we're going to outright rebellion. All right, he got a group of guys together, says we're going to basically overthrow the government. Going to overthrow it and take over. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of the conspiracy. It's often referred to as the Catilinarian conspiracy. It really kind of got going big time in the summer of 63. And in the fall of 63 BC, November and December to be exact, Cicero delivered a series of 4 speeches against Cataline. We refer to them as the Catilinarian orations, in which he laid out what was going on, who was involved, all the details. He wanted to get the Senate behind him. He wanted to get the Roman people behind him. Eventually, some pretty high-ranking Roman senators were executed for their involvement in this thing. Cataline himself fled from Rome and was defeated in an open battle January the following year, January of 62 BC, and was killed in battle. Now, Cicero, if anybody knows anything about him from the ancient world, it's that he was an amazing orator, amazing public speaker. And I've taught this speech for years and years and years. And in fact, my master's thesis, my master's degree is in classics, and my master's was focused on that as well. Now, what I'm going to hope here is that my neighbor's mower is not too loud. Oh my goodness. What do you imagine? Right as I'm recording some stuff, we're talking about language, we got the mower going on next door. So well, hopefully this will turn out well. But this speech, and what I talk about it with what I say about it with my students, it highlights the power of oratory and the way we phrase words to give additional meaning and punch to the things that we are saying. Let me start with a quick English example. Many Americans will remember or heard of the inauguration speech by John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy. And the famous line in it, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That is an example of a classical Greco-Roman rhetorical device called the chiasmus. C-H-I-A-S-M-U-S, chiasmus. Chiasmus is an A-B-B-A arrangement of words, okay? So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, when Kennedy said, that's not what your country, that's item A, can do for you, there's item B. But what you, he repeats, item B again, can do for your country, item A again, right? A, B, B, A arrangement. Well, in this speech, Cicero uses that and so many other amazing devices, okay? And I want to walk you through a little bit of that. So I'm going to tell you straight up, this is going to be a bit of a nerd fest, okay? He starts off the speech, and I will tell you, I do have this memorized. This is not coming off of a script, simply because, for two reasons. One, I've taught it so many years, and in my Roman reenactment, my historical reenactment, one of the characters I portrayed was Cicero. And I would do part of the speech in the presentations, okay? So he starts off, and it almost sounds like you're missing some part of the speech, because he starts off with, how long will you abuse our patience, Cataline? So he's talking to Cataline in the Senate. The whole Senate is gathered there. In fact, I'm going to bring up a picture for you here. There's a painting of this, a modern-day painting from the 1800s, and it's a fresco, actually. And you see Cataline skulking off to the side. You see all the senators arrayed around him, and there's Cicero on the floor, hands up. He is declaiming his speech. And he starts off and he says, Quousque tandem abutera, Catalina, patientia nostra, quam diuetem furoriste tuus nos eludet, quem ad finem sese effrenata jactabit audacia. What he says there is, how long will you abuse our patience, Cataline? How long are you going to mock us, right? You think we're idiots, right? To what end will your madness, your unbridled madness, flaunt itself? What's noticeable about that is that, first of all, these are rhetorical questions, questions that do not expect an answer. So there's a neat little device right there. Second, he begins each of those three sentences with a form of the same word. Quo, usque tandem abutera, quam is like quo, it's a form of the same word, and then quem, quo, quam, and quem begin each of those three sentences. And you say, well, what's so special about that? Well, I'll tell you. It's a device called anaphora. A-N-A-P-H-O-R-A, anaphora. An anaphora is when you repeat the same word at the beginning of several phrases or clauses or sentences in a row. So it just draws attention to something, okay? You can imagine me saying something like that. I might say, pipes are something that I enjoy. Pipes are something that I take pleasure in. And pipes give me peace and relaxation at the end of the day, right? Well, boy, you realize right away, you are involved in some kind of speech that's not normal, right? This is not everyday chit-chat at Starbucks, right? So you begin with the same word. Then he launches into a very long sentence, very, very long sentence. And this is something that Latin does very, very well. English, not so much. Sometimes in English, if you start putting a whole bunch of things together in a sentence, that turns into a run-on sentence. You may remember your English teacher back in the day talking about run-on sentences. Well, Latin likes this kind of thing. Latin likes the very long sentence. And so the next one goes, nihil ne te nocturnum praesidium palati, nihil urbis vigiliae. Listen for the repetition of the word nihil. Nihil timor populi, nihil concursus bonorum omnium, nihil hic munitissimus habendi senatus locus, nihil horum ora vultusque moverum. Now, did you hear that nihil, 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 nihil? Did you hear that word each time? So in the next very long sentence, he's got that anaphora again. He's got the repetition of a word over and over and over again. But there's more. In this really long sentence, he has two, what we call tricola, back to back, one getting bigger and one getting smaller. And you're going, Steve, you're completely losing me. What are you talking about? A tricolon is a grouping of three. Right? Tricolon is a grouping of three. Golly, I'm getting ashes all over myself here. Getting too excited about the Latin. Okay? And good night, nurse. Just burned a hole in my shorts. All right? A little hot ash came out there. All right. Please tell me, did I burn a hole in my shirt? You know what I did. Dadgummit, I burned a hole in my shirt. All right. I'm getting a little too excited. Tricolon is a grouping of three. Right? Tri, three. And in the next sentence, he's talking about the fact that there's all these things going on in the city that should alert Cataline to the fact that everybody knows what he is up to. And he starts off small. He talks about the fact that the rich people on the Palatine Hill have started putting out night guards to protect their houses. Nihil ne te nocturnum praesidium palati, he says. And he says, does that not get your attention? Then he goes up a level just from that one hill where the rich people in the city lived. He says, nihil ne te nocturnum praesidium palati, nihil urbis vigiliae. How about the fact that we've got night watches set out around the entire city? Does that not tip you off that we are on to you? Then he goes up to the next level and he says, nihil timor populi, the fact that the entire Roman people are afraid of you. Does that not get your attention? And so he's gone from small to medium size to bigger, all of the people of Rome. And then he stays at that big level and he starts to work his way back down. He talks about where they're meeting in the Senate and the fact that they've got extra guards around the Senate until he finally gets down to the very last part. He says, how about the facial expressions of the people sitting around you? Don't you realize they know what you're doing? Well, again, you and I don't normally talk like that with tricolon, going up, going down, repetition of the word with the anaphora. Oh my goodness. And then the speech goes on from there. It just is loaded with such devices as, let me share a few more with you if I get this lit and don't burn the rest of my clothes off. There's a wonderful device called praeteritio, and he uses it. Praeteritio is where you pretend that you're not going to draw attention to something by drawing attention to it. At one point in the speech, he says, Nam illa nimis antiqua praeterio, quod Gaius Suilius Ahalus spurium maelium novis rebus studentem manus sua occidit. He says, I'm going to pass over. I'm not going to talk about things that are too far in Rome's past, like the fact that, and then he goes on and quotes something from Rome's past. Now, you may have heard stuff like this from politicians today. I'm not going to talk about the fact that my esteemed opponent has raised taxes in his state every single year that he's been governor. And I am not going to talk about the fact that the education levels in my opponent's state have gone down every single year that he's been governor. And I am not going to talk about the fact that there have been allegations of wrongdoing every single year that my opponent has been in office. Guess what? You just did, right? By saying you're not going to talk about it, you are, in fact, talking about it. So it's a neat little rhetorical trick. It grabs people's attention, and so forth. Another one that Cicero likes to use, he uses both of these, they're opposites of each other. So there's something called polysyndeton, and there's something called asyndeton. Polysyndeton is when you use more conjunctions than are really necessary, and it slows down the speech and draws attention to the individual elements. All right, for example, sometimes I'm hungry and I go to a particular restaurant that I enjoy, and I might say, I'm going to have a hot dog and a hamburger and French fries and onion rings and a Diet Coke and a chocolate shake for dessert. Well, I didn't need to say "and" every time, right? But by doing that, I really emphasize each individual element. And that's called polysyndeton. Think like a polygon, right? Many-sided figure. All right, so that's poly, so many conjunctions. The opposite of that is asyndeton. Asyndeton tends to speed up the action, tends to speed up what's being said, and that you want to use that when you're kind of overwhelming your audience with information. We have many serious problems facing our nation today. We have too much crime, poverty in our cities, low test scores among our children, breakdown of the family, general moral falling apart, utter devastation. All right? Boom, 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 boom. Didn't put an "and" in there at all. And the point there is not to focus on each individual item, but to pretty much overwhelm you with information. Now, Cicero's a master at this. He's a master speaker. And so many modern speakers today, if they're really well trained in oratory, they're going to study stuff like this. They're going to study these great ancient speakers, because these are the guys who first came up with this stuff. And these are the guys who really first showed the power of that sort of rhetorical device. And I think, honestly, in the modern age, we may actually not even hear it so much in politics, but sometimes it's in preaching that you hear some of this public speaking the best. So, one of my all-time favorite speeches, the first Catilinarian oration by Cicero, chock full of great oratory. Talk to us a little bit. Are there any famous speakers, or maybe not famous, maybe it's just people you know, maybe in your own hometown or something, but speakers that you really enjoy? Political? Religious? I don't know. Corporate? Are there any speakers, people who really have that command of oratory? Maybe somebody from history. You think about Winston Churchill. Maybe, again, you think about Kennedy, and so forth. Or maybe somebody from the ancient world. Anyhow, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I got to tell you, folks, I am really hacked off that I burned a hole in my shirt and my shorts with some embers that flew out of here. So anyhow, there's that. Folks, as Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago, ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.